Sensory experiences can be transforming. They can transport us into another dimension during the experience itself, as well as later, after we've had time to reflect on it. Our gospel story today about the Transfiguration is a familiar one that describes a very sensory spiritual experience involving seeing, listening, and touching. This morning, we will talk about how our ordinary sensory experiences can transform us and invite us more deeply into an encounter with the divine. I want to begin with what I believe are two essential points of transformation: listening and risking. Contemplative listening draws us into a deeper, more perceptive way of understanding life. It is part of the reflection and soul space Joan Chittister invited us to in our first reading. A regular practice of contemplative listening helps transform us. Second, risk is a key part of the transformation process and is connected with contemplative listening. We must be willing to risk stepping into the unknown and risk doing what our listening heart is leading us toward. When we do, transformation is the gift that awaits. Let's now consider some ordinary sensory experiences and how they might transform us. As we know, movies can be very sensory, whether action-packed, like Star Wars episodes, inspirational, such as Hidden Figures, or nature-focused, like the National Park series. Recently, Stan and I rented Hidden Figures, a movie about 3 African-American women who began working for NASA in the 1960s during the race to the moon. How many are familiar with that movie? Oh, great. So a lot of us have either seen it or heard about it. We first saw it several years ago. And once again, I found it to be so inspiring. The inner strength of these 3 women was extraordinary. Their ability to listen to their convictions and the call of their heart and to pursue their career and educational goals was stirring. And the dignity with which they faced racism was inspiring. They clearly listened deeply to their inner voice and risked stepping into the unknown, into what was new ground for women and for African Americans, and into what was hostile territory at times. After viewing this movie, I felt transformed, perhaps even more deeply than I did when I initially saw it. I believe their ability to listen and risk is an invitation to all of us to see God in their being and their actions, and to ponder how we are called to listen and risk in the territory of our life. As some other illustrations, the birth of a child or the death of a loved one are profound sensory moments of deep reflection and transformation. Birthing into this life and into the next dimension is intensely transformative. I encourage each of us to listen to how these experiences have touched our soul and how the divine presence continues to speak through them. Nature also provides transformative sensory experiences. Whether a secluded, unshaded trail in the west, a lush forested path nearby, a beautiful towering mountain, or the rhythmic sound of the ocean waves, each invites us to an encounter with the divine. A couple weeks ago, while hiking on a remote trail in Wyoming, we felt the intense heat of the sun and the warm touch of the breeze on our skin as we walked on the rocky earthen trail. Then we saw 6 gorgeous mule deer bounding through the open space with these sand-colored dunes, actually buttes, in the distance. This sensory experience of sight and touch beckoned us to listen to its beauty, to its wildness, and our need to be in touch with the wild parts of our soul. Let us listen to nature in its many forms and risk finding the nearness and wildness of our God. The last example is a personal one that I shared several years ago in a homily in a different context. It's related to the Litany of Saints music that was part of my priestly ordination in 2011. As the musicians and singers rendered the litany, I had a profound sensory spiritual experience. As I lay prostrate along with the other 3 women who were being ordained, I felt the presence of these saints around me. As the musicians invoked all holy men and women to pray with us, I then saw in my mind and heart dear ones in my life who were living, as well as those who were deceased, and felt their presence intensely. During this moment, I felt the divine essence permeate and embrace all who were gathered. Because these singers and musicians, and Polly Weldon was among them, rendered this song in such a prayerful way, our awareness of God was exceedingly heightened. I will always be grateful to them for their significant contribution to this special moment. Although this divine encounter occurred 12 years ago, it continues to transform me. I have come to believe without a doubt that the presence of those who have passed on and those who are living is ever so close, the veil ever so thin, and that the God essence permeates everything. May we listen to the experiences of our soul and be open to their transforming power. Whether sensory experiences of movies, births, deaths, nature, music, or something else, our revealing and transforming God is there, inviting us to listen and to risk. I encourage each of us to take time this week to reflect on an ordinary experience as it is happening, or perhaps later, and look for the divine in that moment. In the weeks ahead, reflect on the notion of transformation. Listen for transforming moments. Be open to them and internalize them so that you can receive the full impact of your experience.